Welcome to Finding Danny Lightfoot, the podcast where we explore the mystery of Joe Torres, who played Danny Lightfoot on Nickelodeon's Hey Dude. I'm your host, Luke Pickard, with my longtime friend, John Kimball. Join us as we explore clues, conduct interviews, and celebrate the legacy that was Hey Dude. Yippee-ki-yay, let's go. Hello, and welcome to episode 10 of Finding Danny Lightfoot, the podcast. Howdy, folks, and welcome to Finding Danny Lightfoot, the podcast. I am your host, Luke Pickard, and I'm joined today with my longtime friend, John Kimball. We are here to bring you what might be the most complete and possibly the only interview with nearly the entire bar none staff from Hey Dude. We were originally going to pack all of this into one final 10th episode, but once we realized how in-depth these interviews turned out to be, there was just no way we were going to be able to leave anything out. So we have split them into two parts. Now, I say nearly the entire bar none staff because we didn't get a chance to interview Mr. David Brisbane, Mr. Ernst himself. But David, if you're listening, we would love to do a part 3 just for you. Please let us know. Before we dive into the interviews, I do want to mention that we have video for most of these conversations, with the exception of Kelly Brown and Debi Kalman, who ran into some technical difficulties when we were recording. If there's enough interest, we are open to outsourcing the editing for that footage. Feel free to email us at findingdannylightfoot@gmail.com if you would like to help make that happen, or if you have any questions about the interviews.
So normally this is the place where I would do our disclaimer that we are not attempting to dox Joe Torres or to reveal anything about Joe Torres's current location that he wouldn't want revealed. Obviously that's not necessary anymore. We've found Joe. We're still standing by that though, which is why a lot of you reached out and said, hey, wait, why didn't you ask Joe about where he is now and what he's up to now, and about his family, about his occupation, et cetera, et cetera. And I just want to say that we did ask those questions, and Joe didn't want to answer those questions, at least publicly. So we're continuing to respect that. And so that's why, unfortunately, that information Joe didn't want to make public. So we're respecting that. And with that being said, I'm not going to be present for the interviews that are coming up in this episode, but I think Luke has done an amazing job with these, and I think they're really important. There may be a sense in which listeners think that kind of the story is over at this point. We've found Joe, which was obviously the goal of our podcast, and in a large sense that is true. We've come to an end in a certain sense. But there is a little bit of wrap up to be done, and I think these voices of people who knew Joe way back in the early 90s when the show wrapped kind of complete the picture, because they can reminisce about their last memories of Joe, and they connect that with this, what happened a couple of months ago where they were reunited with Joe after many years of not having seen him. And I think there's some really interesting thoughts and memories expressed by these cast members for the most part, and then additionally a writer.
Yeah, we did get a lot of really interesting stuff out of these guys. I do want to say that it started out with just the cast thoughts and emotions about reuniting with Joe, but we couldn't resist asking a few more bonus questions about their overall experiences on Hey Dude as well. We are incredibly honored to have the chance to speak with so many people who brought this iconic show to life. So let's get started with our interview with Miss Lisa Melamed. She penned several episodes of Hey Dude. She also was the one who opened up her home in October of 2024 to the cast members and to us and other podcasters, that allowed us a central place to get together and talk once the SplatCon convention fell through. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for being here, and thank you for giving us this time to interview with you. And thank you again for opening up your home last year to host us and allow us a place to talk with the rest of the cast members about this important event, not SpotCon, but Finding Danny Lightfoot. Thank you so much.
It ultimately ended up being, I think, a fantastic weekend.
Absolutely. And I think David alluded to this later in our interview. It really allowed us to have a more intimate sort of environment that we couldn't have recreated in a larger hotel with fans and things like that around. We were able to get to know each other a little bit better, spend more time with each other, and of course, talk to and meet Joe Torres, who played Danny Lightfoot.
The other thing, even though it was 35 years ago, we all lived in a hotel together. So,
Oh, yeah.
seeing those people walking around in pajamas was not unusual. That's how we lived.
So many memories, I'm sure. I've always been curious about the process behind the writing side of things. I don't know much about how that world works, but I'd love to hear your story on how you became a writer for such an iconic show like Hey Dude.
I was an executive before I was a writer, and I worked at Scholastic Productions, which was a division of Scholastic Books. And Alan Goodman had come in to pitch some projects to us. So I knew him from being on that side of the desk. I was at Scholastic for about 7 years, and then I decided I wanted to pursue writing. Alan knew that, and he was heading up the writing staff for the first, I think, 2 seasons. So he called me. It's interesting because it was not a Writers Guild show, which was beneficial to me because I, at the time, was not a Writers Guild member, but I was a writer and wanting to do it. And Alan asked if I wanted to do a script for them, and I pitched a bunch of ideas, and the one that he picked was Dan the Man, which ties in very nicely to this conversation about Joe.
It does.
Because it was a very Danny-centric episode. We didn't really have a writer's room the way most shows do, where you sit with everybody and break the stories and then somebody goes and writes them. It was essentially a bunch of freelance people orbiting around whoever was the head writer at the time. First it was Alan, and then it was Graham Yost. So I became one of the writers who did 2 episodes in every batch of 13. And they also always kept a writer on set to be there for continuity, to help the directors out if it rained one day and you had to move the set from outdoors to indoors, to keep an eye on things. The Nick Narc is what the kids called us. I ended up doing that job for the last 13 episodes. So I lived in Tucson. I think one of the reasons that I know the cast as well as I do, obviously, is because I lived with them. So I ended up writing 8 episodes for the show.
So Dan the Man obviously was one of them. Do you recall the other 7?
Dan the Man, Ecstatic, Sewn at the Hip, Stick Around, Miss Tucson, Crush, and then I wrote, I'm missing a Dudesbury, and I wrote the teleplay for Low Budget Brad. Someone else had come up with that story, and I ended up doing enough work on it that I got teleplay credit for it. So of those, 2 of them were very big Joe Torres episodes.
Well, that works out quite well. Good memory, by the way. I don't know how you did that. I know you've written several things since then. You are in the Writers Guild now, right?
Yeah, I ended up on the show Brooklyn Bridge. That sort of came and went in the early 90s. And then I went on Sisters for 3 years and kind of went on from there. Party of 5, Man About You, Lipstick Jungle, Dolly Parton's Heartstrings.
I saw that you worked with Dolly. That's awesome. You know, I'm in Nashville, so Dolly and I are practically neighbors.
Dolly is everything you want her to be.
That's awesome when people live up to the hype of their persona. So when was the last time that you had seen Joe prior to this weekend in October?
At the wrap party for Hey Dude.
Wow, so you had not seen him at all since the wrap party. That's crazy.
Or spoken to. That was December of 1990.
Wow, so it's been a minute. So let's talk about the rumors. I'm sure you've heard of them over the years. Like, did any of them stand out to you as something that sounded probable or specifically ridiculous or anything like that?
I was really hoping that he was alive because there was
Sure.
some talk of that. I didn't think he became a car salesman. That seemed ridiculous. And I always hoped that he continued being an artist. I mean, as I thought about Joe over the years, because that was such a big part of his identity and who he was, and also what inspired my writing Dewsbury. When I thought of him, I thought of him very fondly, and I would read the things on the internet, and in particular in the last couple of years as podcast stuff has happened, and you know, the Yay Dude girls who end their every episode with, you know, we hope you're well, Joe Torres. So he's been on my mind. You know, like everybody else, I had no sense of how we would find him.
Okay, so you had not seen Joe since 1990. You knew about SplatCon already, right?
I was going to be on the panel with the cast, and then we had also planned to have a cast dinner at my house Saturday night.
Okay, so there was already something in the works that was going to happen.
Yeah, so I knew I was going to see everybody.
But you assumed that Joe wasn't going to be there because why would he be?
yeah, I mean, I didn't know that anybody had the means to find him. Coming into the couple of days before the event, I knew that he was coming, and I was really glad about that.
So tell me about that process. How did you find out that he was going to be coming out to Los Angeles?
What happened is Kelly sent me a photo of Joe and Allie.
And just for clarity, Allie is the younger sister of Josh Tygiel, who played Buddy.
And to be very honest, I recognized neither person in the photo because the last time I'd seen Allie, she was a child. And and I hadn't seen Joe as an adult man. So
Right.
I got this text from Kelly, and I wrote back and I said, like, who is that? Why did you send me that?
Uh-huh.
And then she said it was Joe. And it's like, mind blown.
How much did you know about the extent of the search for Joe?
I mean, I had found your podcast and I had listened to it, so I knew you guys were looking for him.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
I didn't know how much was percolating.
I remember thinking early on that we might actually find Joe really quick. Some of the first tips that we got seemed very promising, but nothing really ever came of them. So we eventually decided to let it go. It wasn't until we got in touch with others from the show, like Allie, that things really started coming together. She really helped us revisit those initial leads, and it turned out they were spot on all along. I remember early on thinking that this might be just somebody named Joe Torres who might even be claiming to be the guy from Hey Dude, but it's actually not the Joe Torres that we're looking for.
I mean, there is a fake Facebook page.
Sure.
Have you seen that?
I have. I've seen several. And
because I saw one where it seemed like the person was pretending to be Joe. I don't know if he ever used the name Joe, but he certainly was presenting himself as the person who played Danny.
Yeah.
I was pretty clear that that was not him.
That's so weird. So when we initially found Joe, we didn't even consider the possibility that he would entertain going to SplatCon. It really wasn't until Allie talked to him about it that we even thought it was a possibility. So when you found out that he had been located, was this after he had committed to SplatCon or before?
No, I heard that they were trying to convince him to come. I mean, the timing was ridiculous, that it was minutes before we were having this big event. So I figured that there would be an attempt to get him to come, and I hoped that he would be tempted to join us. I mean, when we did the ATX, obviously Kelly couldn't be there because of a family situation, but we really felt his absence. We didn't have the whole band together.
I can tell you that's how the fans felt too when they saw parts of the cast reuniting at ATX or other events, but Danny was always missing. It was sort of like trying to reunite the Saved by the Bell cast without Screech. I mean, having that show come back without him, there was just a big void. So when did you actually meet him that weekend? Was it Thursday or Friday?
Friday afternoon, he and Allie and her posse came to my house.
So once it was clear that SplatCon was not going to happen, I see.
When we found out that the event wasn't happening, Kelly had been staying with me. She came out a week early and was hanging. Friday morning, she heard from Allie and told me, immediately that it was canceled. And I just said, tell everybody to come here. Like, we're going to make this HQ. And so they showed up Friday afternoon.
Opening up your home like that was critical to making this happen. That was great. I know I've said this before, but while everybody else was on social media airing their grievances and talking about how they wanted to sue and get their money back and all of this, the Hey Dude family, if you will, was trying to make something work. That just really speaks loudly to the connection that the people from the show had.
I mean, again, I think part of it is that we all live together. It's a different experience.
You're probably right. So Joe shows up at your house on Friday night. This is the first time you've seen him in 35 years or so. What was that like?
Well, I mean, the funny thing is, and I'm sure other people have said this, is Joe has a very distinctive voice, even just the tone of his voice. And so while the photo, I didn't feel the essence of Joe. But the minute he walked in and started talking, then it all came together and it made sense. And one of the nicest things is he walked into my house and he was looking around at all the art and the photographs on the wall. And again, this is a person I haven't seen in 34 years. And he just looked and he said, yeah, this looks like you. And I really appreciated that. And I loved it because it sort of showed that the connection was still there after all the years.
Was there any anxiety or awkwardness or anything like that?
Nope, nope, nope.
Everybody seems to say the same thing.
I was a little worried for him because I thought it could be, sensory overload. But I think that, again, there was something very nice and chill about just, being you're right, what you said before, being in a house as opposed to a hotel, as opposed to on a panel. I think it was a good, like the astronauts coming back kind of thing. I think it was a good way, and that he got to see people in smaller, like it wasn't a surprise party, where people
Yeah.
you. I mean, he got to say hi to this one and then that one, and it was really lovely. We were always planning to do a private cast only dinner at my house, so that was on the books. When we thought the event was happening, just so that everybody would have a space to be where there weren't people gawking at them.
And then we ruined it by showing up and gawking at them.
No, that was, that made it fun. That was fun. When David Lasher talks about the show, he always says that we were making the show and we had no idea who was watching. Nickelodeon was very new. We were out in the desert. It wasn't like they were doing a lot of promotion. We were just doing our thing. And at least from my perspective, the fact that these years later, you guys bother to do a podcast, the fact that the show still means something to people. Of course, we wanted you to participate in this. I mean, it's tremendously flattering, and it keeps it alive, and it gives us all an excuse to talk to each other, and that's really wonderful. So you guys were very welcome.
We felt very fortunate to be there, and I remember the feeling when we walked in that these guys were our family, even though we had never met them. And I think that's because that's what they felt like when we were kids. I mean, they targeted the show to us, and the show turned out so well. And that's really how we felt. We felt like these guys were people we'd known forever.
And it really was our intention to focus on friendship. Like, that's really what the show was about, and how people show up for each other. And it certainly was my intention with every script that I wrote. And I think it was everybody's intention with all of them, ranging from the more serious episodes to the wacky episodes. At the end of the day, people were always there for each other. And I think that's a tribute to Alan and Graham, who are both really decent human beings. Those were the stories we wanted to tell. And I think all of the writers were on that same journey together. There's something really likable about the cast. You felt a nice spirit coming from them. I understand why a kid would come home from school and think, oh, there's my friend, Jake, there's my friend Melody. Fully get that.
It really felt like I had just walked in to meet my cousin that I hadn't seen in a couple years.
I mean, as a writer, that's tremendously flattering.
You guys did a great job of really defining these characters and giving them these qualities that allowed the demographic to connect with them in a very personal way.
But also, I think the fact that 2 of the cycles, Graham lived on set, and there was a couple of the Roths, Stephen Deanne Roth lived on set, and then I lived on set. So we knew them. And I think you write to that. I mean, obviously, the first script that I wrote, I had seen some episodes, but I didn't know the cast. Nickelodeon actually was really good about this, and they would fly everybody out to the set once or twice a year so we could walk around and get a sense of the geography, but also hang out with these actors a bit. And specifically for me, like the 2 biggest examples of how I kind of, mind that was writing Dudesbury for Joe, because he was an artist, and having Christine sing in Miss Tucson. And those were things that I would not have known had I not been around them. But what's really fun about series television too is that you're with the same characters, you're growing them as you're going along, and you're getting to figure out what they're good at. When Joe and John were a great comedy team. And
really,
we didn't know that was going to happen. But then when we saw it, you start putting them in scenes together and something terrific happens.
Is there anything that stands out about Joe and his personality that you recall from being on set with him?
I actually have a very nice example of that, which is at the wrap party, Joe gave me, he had done a drawing. I sound so New York, a drawing. He had done a drawing on the cover of one of my episodes. I'm pretty sure it was Crush. And it was like hands overlapping. It sort of looked like an Escher drawing. And he mounted
Oh,
it, gave that to me as a wrap gift. And I
oh,
remember, it's so weird because it's so many years ago, but I remember he said to me, "You gave me your best, so I gave you my best."
wow, that's incredible.
It was such a nice way to say, goodbye and thank you to somebody that you had worked with for a couple of years. And that is my favorite. I still have it somewhere. I moved a couple of years ago, so things are not where they always are, but I know that I still have that drawing somewhere.
So apparently, Joe is not ruling out doing other events like this in the future, which I think is pretty incredible considering he was not even considering doing the one, and now he's potentially going to do more than one. John and I are just like, man, how crazy is it? If he does that, that he would have
It's
gone
your
from being,
fault.
yes, yes.
I have a feeling that he was just living his life. Like, I don't think that every day he was thinking, I'm not in the spotlight. He may not have even known about the ATX Festival. Probably somebody at some point said, "Hey, Joe, people are looking for you." But I didn't get the sense that it was gnawing at him in any way or that he was feeling an absence. I think he just went on with his life. And so I think this just became like this bonus, lovely, hey, here are my friends. And look, they're still cool and we all still like each other very much. And so hopefully that will be something that gets added to his life.
So that's about all the questions we have for you. Is there anything that you want to add to the episode or that you want to talk about before we go?
Well, the last thing that I did and the thing that I'm tremendously proud of is my episode of Dolly Parton's Heartstrings, which is still streaming on Netflix. And the one that I wrote is called Cracker Jack. And
Okay.
it is nothing like Hey Dude, except that it is, as always, about how friends show up for each other. And I feel like that has been a running theme in all of the writing that I've done over the 35 years that I've been a professional writer. And it started with Hey Dude. I mean, I'm very grateful to that show that it launched my career. I, feel a particular affinity towards Joe Torres because he was, the titular character of my first episode of television ever. And it was because I had that character to hang that story on. And that was the script that Graham Yost read when he was on set and said, "Oh, let's keep this writer." I thought Joe and particularly his scenes with Kelly in that episode were really beautiful. And, that's the most exciting. I got to see my name on television, was really exciting. So it launched the fact that I'm a writer, but also the type of things that I like to write about. So from start to finish, it's about how your friends show up.
That's awesome. I bet your friends adore you.
And I have friends that I adore. And I'm, very grateful that I've stayed very good friends with Kelly, very good friends with Christine. I see David now all the time out here.
Oh yeah, he's out there.
Yeah. And now, that everybody's back in touch. There's a lot of texting going on.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Lisa. So that concludes the interview with Lisa Melamed. We're going to go ahead and go into the interview with Josh Tygiel, who played Buddy on Hey Dude. So, Josh, thank you so much for being here and giving us this time to talk to you about this part of your life. Let's get started with talking about Mr. Torres. Prior to the event in October in Los Angeles where we met, when was the last time you had talked to Joe?
Probably around the time the show ended, maybe a little bit later. And we were both in Tucson. I vaguely remember walking past him at the mall or something like that and saying hello. That might have even been between some seasons, not not after. But I'd never really spoken to him directly. Very different situation back then. Just nobody had cell phones, there was no internet, so you needed to know somebody's phone number and whatever to call them.
Yeah, it's hard for kids nowadays to understand how you can just lose track of someone. But if you lost a number or moved,
Yeah, they would need to call everybody or write everybody a letter.
yep, exactly. So did you actually hear the rumors about Joe before he was located?
Oh yeah, I've known those rumors for years, and kind of amusing.
Did any of them stand out to you as plausible, or do they just all sound crazy?
I mean, a lot of them were crazy. I mean, the favorite one was like a used car salesman in New Jersey. I think somebody had done like a face recognition thing and didn't look anywhere near Joe. And then in the picture, this other guy didn't even look the right age. The ones that seemed most realistic were kind of the ones that seemed to be true. So he was just still quietly hanging out in Tucson.
Yeah, we saw so many that were crazy, like him being abducted by aliens and stuff like that. Clearly, some people just make stuff up.
People make stuff up, and lately with AI, you get some. Yeah, my sister sent me a video a few months ago saying that I was dead and that Joe had this great career, still a top Hollywood actor. I remember when I was in college, probably like 98, 99, when some of the first like fan sites popped up and things were completely inaccurate. Yeah, one said I was living somewhere, some city that I'd never even been to and had gone goth. At the time I was in college in England, just like, no, I'm not. So
that's one thing I've learned as I've gotten a little older is that it's so easy to put stuff out on the internet or in media that it's just not true. So it's really stuff that you have to take with a grain of salt.
Well, people fill in the blanks on stuff, and obviously through all the years, it was like always knew what David and Christine were up to because they were still kind of in the public eye, and then with the rise of Facebook, it ended up connecting with a bunch of the other people. But yeah.
So explain how you found out that Joe had been located in that series of events.
Yeah, my younger sister, who still lives in Tucson, was digging around. I think she was working with you guys.
Yes, she was.
She told me she'd found him, and then she called, said he wasn't there, but the guy who worked there said that he would be in the next day.
Yep, that's pretty much it. And she went back the next day, and there he was.
I got a text message from her with a picture of the two of them, which was interesting. It was the first time to kind of see what Joe looks like after all these years. I mean, the fact is we were all teenagers at the time, so it's people are still recognizable. But I was thinking of Joe with like longish hair. It's like obviously he's not going to have that 1990 teenager hair at this point.
So when you first saw him that weekend in Los Angeles, what was that like between the two of you?
And it was interesting. I mean, I'd just seen David and Kelly and Christine in March at 90s Con. And I mean, Kelly and Debi, I'm friends with and knew what they looked like. And Jonathan still looks exactly like Jonathan. So you walk in and see everybody, and it's kind of some hellos, and there's a guy sitting at the table. It's like, that's got to be Joe.
Do you recall the first thing that you guys said to each other?
He started singing in the Rain, which is like a reference to a scene from Clockwork Orange, which was always his favorite movie.
So during the interview with David and Christine, they actually mentioned the same thing, which is funny.
Yeah, a few years later when I was in college, I was taking a literature class where we read the book. I was like, I know all this. It was amazing the little things you remember about somebody.
So obviously you were the youngest at the time that was on the cast. So what kind of an impact did Joe have on you? Was it a best friend feel or a family feel or a big brother sort of situation?
I mean, I think with everybody in that group, I mean, I was definitely like the younger kid. And it's strange. We were just talking about that the age difference is not significant now. It's like everybody still thinks of me as so much younger, but I was talking to David, he's just 3 years older than me. So, I mean,
but that seemed like so much at the time.
Yeah. I mean, when you're 16 and 13 and Joe and Christine were 17 when we started, so that 3 to 4 year age difference is huge at the time. When I would hang out with him offset, I always felt like it was, I mean, the same type of feeling as going out with like my older sister and her friends. It's strange the things you remember about various people, like what music people listen to, what movies people like. There's definitely like music that I never would have listened to, but Joe always went off about it, so give it a listen, stuff like that. So, and I mean, Joe and I were also the two Tucson kids, so there was definitely a local spotlight on us that really didn't happen for anyone else, especially early in the show. There was a couple like joint interviews that we did and profiles for like local newspapers and stuff like that.
We actually featured one of those articles on our podcast. They were talking about you and him being from Tucson and things like that.
Is that the one from the Daily Star?
Yeah, I think it is.
Actually, I in storage, but I have the original plates from that.
Oh, do you? That's really cool.
Yeah, a family friend contacted the newspaper and got the original plates that were used to print that before they were destroyed.
That's pretty awesome.
I think at the time is they put it on like a metal sheet that could be inked up and copied.
I see. So let's talk about your experience with the show in general. Has your relationship with the show changed since the show ended?
Definitely has. At the time I was doing it, it was a lot of fun and very proud of it. And some of the years kind of immediately after, when I was back in high school and college, the people I was friends with were kind of the generation just ahead of the people who watched it. A lot of them were like, "Oh yeah, you're the guy from that show I'm stuck watching every time I babysit," or and so there was definitely some some teasing about it, but it's also always been part of my life and whatever. And about the last 10-15 years where it's turned into this nostalgia thing, and kind of recognizing that that we did something that impacted people's childhoods. People enjoyed watching. It was such a different time. No internet, no anything, but also beyond that, we were filming in Tucson. It's not like we were at a studio in LA or Orlando or anything like that. We were just kind of out on our own. So we're in this complete bubble. I knew the show was popular locally. I know my younger sister's friends were watching it, and that made perfect sense. It was 10-year-old kids in Tucson. But as I've gone on and it's become bigger and bigger thing, that I realized what it really kind of meant. There's a divide among coworkers of mine. There's a group of coworkers who watched it all the time as kids. Kind of becomes part of training when somebody new joins my company. They're like, "Oh yeah, that's who this is." And then there's some younger ones who have no idea what any of it is. And so I have one coworker who calls me Boomer because she jokes I'm old. She has no idea what any of it means, and other people talk about having watched this show. So I had one coworker who apparently at one point, before we started working closely together, made some reference to "Hey Dude" around the office or something. And again, I was already working remote, so I was not in person with any of these people. It was just like a name on an email. But yeah, I get a bunch of stuff saying that somebody had been talking about the show, and now we're good friends. But it was like people had to pull her aside and say, "Oh, guess what?"
That's pretty funny.
Somebody I worked with for 10-12 years, was a direct report of for probably 2 or 3 of those. It was like, "Oh, by the way, I used to always watch the show. I probably saw every single episode." I was like, "Okay, and how come you never mentioned this the previous 10 years we've been working together?" Well, I didn't want it to be weird.
I don't know what's weirder, telling them that you're on a show when you first meet them or waiting 10 years and then telling them that you're on the show. It seems like it's kind of a catch-22 to me.
Yeah, so that's always interesting. Then again, doing some of these retro cons lately and stuff, it's just meeting people who, again, are people have stories about why it meant something to them, and it's very similar to there's TV shows and movies I watched that I have certain memories connected to, and so it's
funny, and John has said this on a few of our episodes, but you guys were like our best friends,
I've heard stuff like that. I think I was the person that people identified with because it was a younger audience, who wanted to hang out with these teenagers.
Yeah, you're right. You're probably the one that people who watch the show could identify with the most.
They wanted to be the other characters, but I was the the kind of conduit. But and I'm strange, in the last 2-3 years, I've rewatched the whole series a few times because I have an 8-year-old who found out I was on a show, and a couple of years ago we were back in Tucson visiting family and took my sons to the set, and my younger one hadn't watched it at the time, so he had no idea what it was. My older one was, kind of nonplussed by it, but my younger one has since started rewatching it. So we're probably rewatched every single episode at least 2 or 3 times in the last few years after not having seen it for 20-25 years. So it's been interesting.
That's got to be so strange for kids to watch their parents on TV like that, and for the people who were on the show to actually rewatch it.
So my son will ask me what was happening in some various episode. I mean, I don't even remember the plot, but I will definitely remember something that was going on the set in the background while it was happening. Those are the memories it triggers for me. It was like, oh yeah, this was the episode where this person was injured, so this person needed to move in and and take over some of their lines. And oh yeah, on this scene, this crew person was having issues, so we needed to swap something out.
What percentage of your lines were memorized versus reading it off of a cue card?
Largely memorized, but short-term memory. I mean, it's not like where somebody does a play and you have to have the entire thing memorized. I mean, the scenes as we were filming them were a minute or two long. We'd do a table read the day before we started shooting, read over the script, try to memorize the lines. But it always started with the initial blocking. We'd all have scripts in hand, and then by an hour later, when we were filming the final scene, that's when we'd have to have it memorized. So, and everybody had a couple times where it was like tricky to remember a line. And it wasn't even cue cards. I remember stuff getting like written in weird, out of the way places.
You mean like props and stuff?
Props. And I remember there was a courtyard that had like a bunch of the guest rooms in it. Those were all actually our dressing rooms. And so that was where we kind of, when we were filming in that area, that's where we all had stuff. But there were a lot of times when somebody was supposed to be going in and out of a guest room, they would just have the door propped open. You couldn't see what was inside. But I can't even remember what episode it was. There was some scene outside of the door. The guest room we were using was Kelly's dressing room. And I remember I could not remember a line, something. And somebody just took a pencil and wrote it on the wall in there.
Now that's improvising.
So I remember Kelly saying at some point, like, why are your lines on my dressing room wall?
I mean, whatever works, man.
And it was right there. It's there were small rooms. Not like they could have somebody sitting there holding a cue card, but the wall was out of sight.
I like learning about all this behind the scenes stuff. That's pretty cool.
Some of it was very interesting. The later episodes, there were a lot of inside jokes. The writers who really knew us, there was stuff that had happened on set that worked its way into episodes. When I rewatch stuff, it's like, oh yeah, somebody must have upset that writer because that's why they ended up in
the trough.
The trough, or getting watermelon or fish thrown at them. I mean, some of it was just the purposes of physical humor, but some of it, there's background lines. Like the episode War, which was the second to last one we filmed. Timmy the Magic Shrimp is a big deal in that episode, and that was a running joke on set for months beforehand. So it just kind of had to get worked in.
That's awesome that they did that. Lisa, who's coming up in the next interview, actually mentioned how she would write to your strengths, which I thought was pretty cool.
There were a few writers who really knew us, and Lisa and Graham and a few others who spent time on the set. And there were some others that by the fourth season, they were still kind of working off of the character descriptions from the first season. As the show went on, the characters became much more like us.
Do you have a favorite episode?
I asked about that a few times. I just brought up War. That was one of my favorites. A lot of the scary stories, really like Take Me to Your Leader. I liked a lot of those like nighttime episodes. And since we were filming on set and on location, nighttime stuff was at night. Usually on a regular daytime episode, we'd get to the set at 7:30 in the morning, work through till 5. But some of those nighttime shoots, we'd get there at noon, or a few episodes we got there as late as 4 or 5 and worked through the night. So it was just cool. We were like, out in the middle of the desert at 2 a.m. And there's times it got cold doing that, but that's definitely something I always think back to. Crush was a fun episode. Lisa made a big deal out of writing that one for Christine and I, because she thought we would work well together on that episode.
That's the one where she was mentoring you because you had a crush on somebody.
Yeah, I had a crush on Christine, and the guys were mentoring me because they didn't realize who it was. I mean, it was a very teenagey episode. And another one that was not necessarily one of my favorites at the time, and this is a little personal, but there was, I forget the name of the episode. There's the one episode where my mother came to the ranch.
Your real mother or Buddy's mother?
Buddy's mother. My real mother was an extra in a handful of episodes, because there was times when they just
I knew she was there.
My parents and my sisters were very good about not spending too much time on the set, not being disruptive, but they liked being out there, like seeing what was happening. But there was a couple times my mom was out visiting, they just needed somebody else to walk across the background. So she showed up in a few episodes, and there was the wrestling episode, which is another like nighttime thing. They needed a bunch of people there for the crowd. So a bunch of my childhood friends and family were in that episode. But no, there's the episode where Buddy's mother came, and just as an adult who's been through a divorce, now I see it's like there's definitely kids out there that would have seen some similarities to themselves in that episode. Yeah, like I said, at the time, it was just, here's another episode we're filming. It was kind of interesting to say, oh, here we're going to see more of what people's life is like off the ranch. But that's one that, again, I rewatch now, and it hits very differently.
One thing I took away from Buddy's character that I think a lot of people of that age would have resonated with was him being out of place and feeling out of place and acknowledging that he was out of place, but not giving up and still fighting to make it work.
Yeah, the funny converse to that is I was the one that was from Tucson. So.
Oh, the irony.
There have been people that I've met who are actually very disappointed to to hear that. I've met people who I was growing up in New Jersey and wanted to do that. It's like, where are you from? It's like, I grew up in Tucson. It's like a disappointment. But even though I was born there, my family ended up there because my dad had a weird cowboy fantasy.
More irony, considering that Buddy's father on the show also had a weird cowboy fantasy.
We always knew that there was that kind of weird Mr. Ernst-ish situation.
Yeah.
My parents were from Brooklyn. My dad had this cowboy fantasy, wanted to move to the desert, told my mom to give him 1 year to get it out of his system. And that was somewhere around 1972. And they never left.
So let's talk a little bit about your audition. How did you learn about it?
I mean, I'd wanted to do acting. I was at a fine arts magnet school. I'd done a lot of local children's theater and stuff in Tucson. For my character, they just did an open call audition. They wanted to cast locally. Most of the rest of the show, except for Joe, they'd cast out of LA and New York. And that meant relocating people for a character that was, I think I was supposed to be 11 in the first season. I was actually 13, but for a 12, 13-year-old, they would need to have a parent with them at all times. And I think they thought it would be a very difficult transition. So they cast locally. There was an open call. There was something about it in the newspaper. So my mom took me down, and the first audition, I think we basically stood in line. I think they took people in groups of 10 or 15 for 10 or 15 minutes and did group activities, stuff like that, and then kind of said, you stay, and the rest of you, thank you very much. Then later that day, I think maybe 20 something people went back for some more of that same type of stuff, and then from that they cut it down to 10 people. That audition phase was Michael Cagle, Brown Johnson, and Rich Ross, I think. Then they gave us a script, and a few days later we went in to do a recorded reading that was sent off to the people in New York to kind of make the final decision. It was probably a week after that I got the call that I'd gotten it.
Did anyone else from your school that you were friends with audition for this?
Yeah, I was at the Fine Arts Junior High, so yeah, there were a number of people from my school who auditioned. There was actually one other kid from my school who came in with me for the final audition. My mom was picking me up from school and bringing me in. This kid's mom wasn't able to get him from school that day, so my mom picked both of us up and dropped us both off there.
Your mom's a better person than I, because I can't say that I would not have accidentally forgotten to pick up the kid that was competing with my kid.
Yeah, so you never know what little issue is gonna change things around a little bit.
This is true. How did you find out that you had gotten the role?
Yeah, I remember I was walking home from school one day, and my younger sister comes running out the front door, going, Nickelodeon call. Things went pretty quickly from there, because I think it was just within a couple weeks from that we started doing all the pre-filming and getting everything together.
I've had a few of those instances in my life where you get those phone calls that tell you that you got a big job or something like that, and then there's that excitement, but also that moment of terror where you're like, okay, now I really have to do this.
Yeah, and it kind of settled in. It's like, oh yeah, this is real. And it's funny. I think a lot of people watch it and assume that what was going on behind the scenes was what you saw on screen. And on some ways, some of it was. I mean, we were really, again, on set, and it was a bunch of teenagers messing around. But we were surrounded by adults. It was, all the crew and stuff, and it was working people, and and serious business getting silly, funny stuff together, and all the the troughings and physical gags and stuff. And those are not easy to set up. Because you have somebody fall into the mud, you have one shot to get that. Because if it doesn't work, you got to get them changed, you got to get them showered off.
That has to be intimidating for someone so young.
They would film the whole scene up until X point, and make sure it had it, and then you just kind of had the one shot for the actual fall or whatever. And there was one episode where Jonathan kept dumping cereal over my head, and that was it was like each time he actually dumped it, it would scatter and whatever. And we had a script supervisor who's on set who, as soon as we wrapped any scene, would have to take a Polaroid of us, just for continuity. So if there's another scene coming up that took place immediately afterwards but was filmed on a different day, so I mean, I remember the makeup team having to look at a picture of me from one scene with cereal on my head and recreate it, because there was a scene where he dumps cereal on my head outside, and then we run into the scene immediately following where we run into the lodge, and I've still got stuff on my head. That was, I think that was filmed a day or two later.
That's some Hollywood magic there.
Yeah, I mean, if we had 4 scenes in the lodge and 2 scenes by the lake and 2 in the bunkhouse, they'd film everything in one location together, just because it takes so much time to move all the.
Would you guys get together at the end of the episodes and watch them when they were done?
Early on, yes. When they kind of were showing us the first, kind of like the rough cut and things were coming in. Mm-hmm. Later on, not so much. There was definitely time when the new episodes were airing, we weren't filming. Because we filmed the first season from like April to June, and then regrouped in September for the second season. And like August, September, I think there was a preview in July, and then August, September. So there was like that first month of airing before we were back together. So, and I'm sure there were times when we got together and watched episodes. I mean, I watched every episode with my family. They were always excited about it. But I don't remember having people over at the house to watch.
What about your life at school? How did that change once you got the role? Did people start treating you any differently?
I was not in school for 2 years. I was on set with private tutors the whole time we were filming. In the first season, it was like the final quarter of middle school for me, and I was in a position that half the school wanted to be in. So, but nobody had seen the show yet, obviously, so nobody really knew what to expect. And then I went to school for like the first month of my freshman year of high school, just because I wanted to experience that, like, starting of it before I went back to doing on-set tutoring. So I mean, I had plenty of my friends that I'd already had. There were some good friends I had who were very excited and supportive throughout. A childhood friend of mine who's an extra in one episode he's lived in LA since college and has had a decent career as an actor and musician, whatever. Always points out that on IMDb, his first credit is wrestling fan and Hey Dude. It's something he's very, very proud of, even though he's had some plenty of other big stuff since. So
I'd be proud of that too, to be honest with you. I'd have that as my first credit.
And then, when I got back to school full time, like middle of my sophomore year of high school, things were different. I mean, it was a much bigger school. Some people I knew, some people knew who I was. But, you walk into a situation like that, everybody's got kind of existing friendships that you're trying to get a part of. So it was a little strange socially. But also throughout, I mean, I stayed involved with some youth groups and local stuff like that kind of kept me with my group of friends.
So obviously you've moved on to things outside of acting now. What was involved in that kind of a decision? Why did you step away from that?
Right after the show ended, if I wanted to immediately pursue an acting career, I would have needed to move to LA, which is only 8 hours from Tucson by drive, but I was 15, so it would mean kind of breaking up my family because, one of my parents would need to move with me and whatever. So I decided to just do like local theater and whatever. I did a few local commercials in Tucson and Phoenix and plenty of theater for a few years. Then I went to college. I started out as a freshman at Arizona as a theater major. And just during that year, I just decided it wasn't what I wanted to do. Love movies, love going to theater. I just didn't want to be on stage. I switched to a history degree, did a lot of studies on cultural history, pop culture, stuff like that, and had kind of hoped to get into that entertainment industry with that sort of background. I guess you could say it ran its course.
It's funny how things like that work out. I wonder if you had not been cast in Hey Dude, if you would have continued to chase the dream of being an actor, and then at some point later in life figured out that that's not what you wanted to do, and then you'd spend all that time on it.
I've wondered about that. I've wondered if I had tried dropping everything and tried to pursue a career immediately after the show, would things have been different?
It sounds like a difficult career, man.
Yeah, it's much more likely that I would have crashed out, and I have no regrets on how my life has played out. So it's and the show gave me a lot of good opportunities. I mean, I had finished the show with college paid for.
Wow, that's great and smart of your parents to think about that ahead of time.
Yeah.
The music industry and the movie industry and even pro sports to some extent, when you see it up close, like yourself or others that are in the fields, how difficult it is for them to make it and the resiliency it takes, the confidence it takes, the hard work it takes. It really makes me respect and appreciate those professions a lot more.
A lot of things need to work out. I lived in New York for a few years after college, and again, there I had plenty of friends who were actors, people who they kind of get an acting job when they can, and had other jobs to keep them occupied, to keep bills paid. There was one guy, I was a friend of a friend I met a few times, a very good career as a commercial actor. I mean, this 25 years on, I still once or twice a year will see this guy pop up. It's like, oh, I remember that guy. And so it shows that there's a lot of different ways of pursuing an acting career, but it's not easy.
Yeah, these musicians in Nashville will go to 2 or 3 bars a night and play just to make enough money to feed themselves.
That's say a lot of them, they're making more money at a bar or restaurant than they would on stage, but it also kind of funds them until they could try to get on stage. It's not easy.
Yeah, and it's tough to have a family too. I mean, especially with kids, like you almost have to sell out and just leave them or hope that they're willing to come with you to make it work.
I mean, you see some of these like horror story stuff that, child actors living with one parent who is difficult and, or abusive at times, and all this stuff people go through. And we didn't deal with any of that. And, I was living at home with my whole family, very supportive, and Nickelodeon was very protective of us. And any indication of mistreatment or whatever. I remember somebody saying once that it's like if they had found any indication that like the parents were being difficult on the kids, they would probably cut stuff off. Sure. Even back then, there were stories about child actors getting robbed blind by their parents.
I'm sure. So where would Buddy's character be today if he was still on the ranch?
Yeah, I have kind of wondered about that, because people always joke, it's like, oh, why isn't there a reboot, which would never happen. But I think Buddy probably would have either been one of those people who adapts to it or comes back to it. It's like, I could see that type of thing. Buddy still, Buddy would own the ranch unless his dad sold it by then, and so you see maybe living back in on the East Coast and coming back to visit regularly to kind of check on the place. And there's a lot of signs of Buddy kind of turning into Mr. Ernst as he got older. Yeah. So it could have turned into that. Oh, I'm picking up where Dad left off.
So I've asked your co-stars the same question, and I will say I think that Buddy would have some competition for buying the ranch, because a few of them said that their characters would have done the same thing.
So I think that's competition.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people could, but again, as the son of the ranch owner, it would make the most sense.
I guess technically Buddy would inherit it instead of having to buy it, unless that crippling gambling debt got back to Mr. Ernst.
Or if one of the other people bought it, again, still go back to visit regularly.
But that's nice of Buddy. So that's pretty much it for me, but I did want to give you the opportunity to say something to the fans out there that are listening in case you wanted to.
Thank you for watching it. Glad you enjoyed it back then. Glad it still means something now.
Well, it certainly does. And we want to express our gratitude for giving us the time that you've given us and for being part of a show that meant so much to us. We really do appreciate it.
It still blows me away that there's an audience for it, but it sounds like there definitely is. And I appreciate that so much.
Thanks again, Josh. That concludes our interview with Josh Tygiel. Now we're going to talk to Jonathan Galkin, who played Jake Decker.
Coolest name in TV.
It's true. So how long had it been since you had seen Joe Torres?
Joe Torres, I hadn't seen in 30 years.
Wow, that's crazy. So compared to other festivals and reunions that you guys have done, did this one carry a little bit different energy because of Joe's presence?
We reunited, a few times over the past 10 years, and there's always something missing, and that was really clear when we all went to Austin. I forget what year that was, but I think it was almost 10 years ago. The Austin television convention, and they did a Hey Dude reunion, and Joe was not. We couldn't find him then. I just feel like there was such relief in the air when Joe was in the room and when we all saw him, and to probably relief that he was alive. He was exactly the same, cracking the same jokes and the same and I think that added a totally different level. Not that the other ones weren't amazing, but something felt completed once we got Joe back. I could feel it right away. All in the same room. It was just, you could probably see it. Everybody was overjoyed.
That's awesome. So how did you find out that Joe had been located, and what was your initial reaction to that?
I heard from both Allison Tygiel, Josh's sister, and I heard from Christine. And it was very cryptic at first. It went from we know where Joe is, or they've narrowed down where they think Joe is, to we know where Joe is, to someone's going to talk to Joe. And I didn't understand that I forgot that she actually lived in Tucson still. So she was the one who went there. And then even when they found him, there was still uncertainty whether he would be up for going to Los Angeles for this now canceled event. So there was just a question. It's funny because he somehow, not on purpose necessarily, but he managed to extend the mystique almost up until the last minute. You know what I mean? It was will he show? Won't he show? Will he attend the event? Will he show up and just have dinner with us and then go home? And it was just oh my God, what could this be about? There must be so much. And ultimately there really wasn't. I think he was genuinely shy about the entire thing, and maybe really nervous because it had genuinely been since the day we said goodbye on set in 1990 that he had seen almost everyone. He had come to visit me once in New York, which he reminded me of in 91. What brought him there, except maybe it was just me, but I feel like he's an amazing artist. There was a lot of things he wanted to check off his list. So coming to New York at that time, getting to go to the famous museums, the famous galleries, famous places that were at that time still standing, like CBGB, and things that he could go visit. And he actually wore the T-shirt that he bought on that trip of CBG, a CBGB merch T-shirt. Yeah, it's weird. I had memory holds that trip, which he reminded me of. And as soon as he said it, I'm like, oh my God, now I totally remember. I was interning at that time at Nickelodeon because I had decided when I got to New York that I wanted to continue to pursue acting, but I really wanted to learn about both sides of the camera. I used my relationships at that moment to get an internship within Nickelodeon. Maybe he had a sleeping bag. I don't he slept on my dorm room floor at NYU while I was interning. And he said he would go out during the day and check out museums and walk the city, and I would go to my job, and then we would meet up at night and go see music and hang out.
Wow, that's so much fun.
He said he was there for a week at least. He said I'd lined up different shows every night. Like we were totally like booked solid. He has a very good memory of that trip. So if you want the details, you might have to talk to him.
Did your time at NYU overlap with Adam Sandler's group of people that he knows from there?
They might have been there, but I feel like they're like a generation ahead of me.
Yeah, he was in 84, so that's right. Did you go to NYU for acting?
I was there for acting, but then I switched into a different program where I could continue to take acting classes, but I was taking film production and screenwriting, and a lot of it was based on real life experience and getting college credit for those. And so I was working at record labels and still taking acting classes at night. And so I was just like, in hindsight, trying to figure it out, like learning what I didn't want to do as much as what I did want to do. I think I'd realized once I spent a semester in just the NYU acting program, I realized how limited that scope would be. And in New York had just way too much else to offer. But even the comedy thing, like I was obsessed with that world when I got to New York and was constantly trying to and sometimes successfully getting my way into like seeing Saturday Night Live taped and going to see the amount of comedians I would see at that time in like Comedy Cellar and Boston Comedy Club, which was in the Village, like people who were starting out at that time, like Sarah Silverman and Dave Attell, Mark Maron, Jon Stewart, Todd Barry, Louis C.K., like a lot of those people who were like real like 90s New York.
What a great place to be during that time for someone who was looking to do what you were trying to do.
That's the only place I wanted to be.
So, what was it like when you sat down to talk with Joe again? Did he bring up any memories from the show that you had forgotten?
To be totally corny, I remember how much I loved him. Like I really like immediately just like, oh my God, like maybe there were like 10 awkward seconds. And then it was just like locking in with like a sibling because we spent so much unfiltered time together for a solid year. And the same with so many of the other cast members that like you can't plan for it. It's just like it's from that concentrated amount of time where you just develop a second language and you develop a comfort with each other and like a sort of like shorthand for comedy and everything, just like a sensitivity to each other. And that was just like, it was like a reflex that came back immediately. We were just like immediately laughing at like the same shit and talking about, you know, alienating everyone else around us by talking about obscure music, quizzing each other, like, have you seen this record or what do you think of this? And you know, going down memory lane, he seems to have a very clear memory of lots of stuff. Yeah, that was the main thing, was just like I remembered how much I loved him and how much we all loved each other.
One thing we've talked about with Lisa and Kelly and Miss Debbie is how the writers would incorporate your personalities a little bit to the characters. And so I think they did such a great job of that it made it really easy to sit down and talk with you guys because I felt like I knew you through your characters.
Yeah, he has a very distinct personality that hasn't changed. He's always been a shy person, and I think his hesitance to reconnect with us and to even just like reconnect with a public that might be wondering where the hell he is that I don't think he really understood that people cared. Like I think like somehow there's an insecurity that was just like no one wants to see me. Like he was so off the grid, a lot of it was just not even on his radar. He was just kind of living in a bubble. I think he didn't realize the urgency and the sort of demand to see Joe. And I think once he took that in, once he saw all of us and how thrilled we were to see him, how easygoing everything was, and also going out and the amount of people who were screaming Danny, Danny. I don't, you know, he doesn't get that anywhere. It's not like he walks around Tucson, as far as I know, and people are screaming Danny at him. I imagine like the opposite, and that he keeps like a really low profile there, or we would have heard somehow. He's like, oh wow, like people remember me. What a weird, like that's so cool. And I think like it's probably been a minute since he had that sort of like feedback from the public.
I don't even know if he had that in Tucson. I mean, you guys were not in Los Angeles and then filming and going out in LA every night. You were in Tucson, which probably didn't have any other filming projects going on at the time.
Like nobody was like very famous yet. Like I feel like the show really started to sink into the popular culture like within like the next 5 years because it was so rerun on Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
I imagine he got, he's a very recognizable person at that time. And so I imagine he did get a bit of it, but that might have just been the thing that turned him off at the time, was like him being a sort of a shy private person and thinking like, oh my God,
Sure.
if this haunt me, I'm going to be incognito and go under the radar. And he like took it to its most extreme conclusion by literally disappearing, and then forgot that people actually cared about him. It was a thrill to reconnect. And he does still have those sort of knee-jerk instincts to not deflect necessarily, but like he's got a real sarcastic, jokey bone in his body. And like I'm sure you got some of this from him, where even when you went to meet him and he was hiding because we wanted to draw out the title of like Finding Danny, and it's just like, no, we can't. You got to find, like, it's like hide and go seek. Like you got to find first. He's somewhere in the house. He typically leads with like a sarcastic remark, and then he might answer the question after that. Like he's like always trying to sort of get one over, but in good fun. It's never mean spirited.
Yes, he would do that on some of the questions that I would ask him, and it was hard for me to determine if he was saying that to avoid the question or if he was saying that just to try to be funny and then answering the question right after that.
I think both. And he's still like, even with me, there were questions I would ask that he just like, by the end of like his weird jokey answer, I was like, oh, he didn't answer the question.
Yeah, I get that.
So half of what I got, like, I don't know if it's a put on. I don't know if he really can't send text messages from his phone or not, but that's what he told me.
We've heard that too from multiple sources, so I think that's true.
That that's just like, his way of staying semi off the grid. Like he's not as reachable as everyone else. No matter what, it was a huge breakthrough.
So, what do you think Jake would be doing today if the show is still going?
Wow, what would Jake be doing? I want to say he might be either teaching drum workshops to kids on the ranch, or running. We could say running a small independent record store.
That's awesome. There's that character and actor overlapping again that I was talking about.
Yes. Well, because his character played. You were saying how they seem to have based the characters on us, which I think like they definitely. I can tell you firsthand that they definitely did. When I got the part, they were asking me all sorts of questions about my interests, and that's where drumming came up. And they were like, okay, we'll write that into the character. Like it wasn't like he was a drummer and they were desperately trying to find a kid who plays drums. It was like they were still shaping this idea of Jake. So that became part of the character. So, and like I remember, I don't know how, like there's some part of me on that show where I was really into psychology, and I feel like at that time I thought my major might be psychology, so they wrote that in as well. I don't know. There's probably a lot of stuff in the show that like didn't end up leading anywhere, but the drumming was like that was a big part of it, and that was something that I've played drums since I was 4 years old.
Same here. I played high school drums and college a little bit. I'm always tapping my feet or my fingers whenever music's on. Do you do that as well?
Yes. I've had many a friend, many a girlfriend put their hands over mine and be like, please stop.
Yes.
My oldest son does the same exact thing, and I noticed it. And he's always been like adamant that like he doesn't want to take lessons. And I could see every time he's obsessed with music though. And so finally, his last birthday, I just bought him like a heavy duty like rubber practice pad that you can buy with like like the shape of like a snare drum with drumsticks. And I was like, just keep that in your room. And I'm not saying you should take lessons, but I'm just saying clearly you've got some instincts. Yeah. See how that works.
Do you catch him playing on it?
He's a few hours away at Bard, but he says he's using it. So that's all I can hope for. I was like my passive way of saying, please do this. But every time I tried to get him to like into something organized, lessons or anything, as a kid, he would reject.
Same with mine. He loves music, but if you try to organize it, he doesn't want to do it.
It's a rebellion. My son's 20, so I'm like, you're still playing in rhythm to every song you listen to nonstop. I'm like, so like part of his present was like, I was like, please, just he showed me how to do he knew how to do a paradiddle. I had taught him that like when he was like 10. And he was like, right, the paradiddle. He's like, right, left, right, left.
Yeah.
I was like, and I had to reteach him a little bit, and I was like, just keep doing that. Just keep doing that.
So how did you learn how to play drums then?
Learned from my dad. who is a drummer, and not professionally, but played since he was a teenager. And by the time I was in 4th grade, I started taking jazz drum lessons. And then, I was in school bands, never like the marching band, but like jazz band kind of thing. And I definitely learned the paradiddles from my drum teacher.
Flams.
Flam, love a flam, love a flam.
Yeah.
It's very effective to learn the flam. I hadn't really played drums, except maybe once in a while, like hitting someone else's drums a little bit. But a few weeks ago, I had a friend who had a sort of a landmark birthday and decided to have a rock karaoke band for the party, and so that he had 2 drum sets set up on stage because he is a drummer as well. And I did get on stage, and this band, they did a different song from every decade every year this person has been alive. So when they got to 1996, I think it was, I played along to Champagne Supernova by Oasis, which I have to say is one of the most fun songs. Like, that is like a great drum along song because it's got like all the Ringo Starr fills in it. It was a little risky because, again, I hadn't played like with a band or anything for so long, and it went well.
I'm envisioning the scene from Step Brothers, the Catalina wine mixer. You going up on stage and just wailing out on the drums. Is that kind of how it was?
My drumming might have been funnier than that scene, though. That's all I'm afraid of.
Funny.
But I feel like if you cut to someone else watching me, it just sounded like throwing a drum set down the stairs.
Well, all that matters is how you heard it in your mind, and you heard it well. So,
I killed it.
are there any behind the scene moments on Hey Dude that not a lot of people know about that you want to share?
Yeah, I do think you develop a bond from being in front of the camera because that takes a level of trust. You're really looking in each other's eyes and just trusting the other actors. And we're all so young, but I do think the majority of our comfort with each other now comes from this time we spent behind the scenes, comes from being off camera and sitting and waiting, comes from arriving at 7 a.m. together and waiting for 3 hours until everything gets warmed up. We're all like 17, 18 years old. So it's like we're just entertaining each other, but we were genuinely all so happy to hang out and make each other laugh or whatever. I have really good memories of the meals and being off camera and laughing. Joe and I might be sitting next to each other listening to like our different Discmans and trading music back and forth. And he would always be drawing. He had sketch pads that he would do these like elaborate, intricate pencil sketches in, like MC Escher style mazes and 3-dimensional figures. And so a lot of it was very inspired by H.R. Giger, who created Alien and a lot of other sort of sci-fi comic world that he was obsessed with. We bonded over a lot of the same culture, and that was very music related, but also film and fine art. I think he was also surprised to meet someone from the other side of the country or whatever, like who, had a similar set of interests that we could trade. And it wasn't necessarily the same exact interest. It was a lot of like, if you like this, wait till you hear this album and vice versa. And a lot of that. He was reminding me, my own dad was making Joe mixtapes because my dad has like a crazy collection. And back then he was like basically an archivist of like old blues recordings and jazz recordings, and he just had hundreds and hundreds of tapes of like all these different blues sessions. And Joe was really into, the older and more obscure the better. It was almost like an R. Crumb style, the way R. Crumb was with like 78 RPM records. Joe Torres has that vibe of like that's how his interests sort of lean. And so my dad was like, oh, you like Big Joe Turner and so. And Joe reminded me, he's like, I still have tapes your dad made me. And I was like, that's so cool.
That's awesome.
Like, even my dad got in on the action of like trading music and names and interests. It was a great time. Great time.
So is there anything you're doing nowadays that you want to talk about or that you want to plug or anything like that?
What do I want to plug? I had started a record label with 2 people many years ago in 2001 called DFA Records, which I'm no longer at. That went for 20 years. And now I am still in the music world. I'm running 4 different record labels. One of them is my own label. One is predominantly jazz. One is really just left fields, indie rock and avant-garde. And the other is a not-for-profit label called Red Hot, which has been around actually since 1990. It's a real activist label where it started out raising money and awareness for HIV in 1990 and did that specific mission for decades and has since diversified the mission. And right now, the biggest project probably the label has ever done, we just launched last week, called Transa, Transa, and absolutely massive artists on the compilation that came out, including the first new song by Sade in, I think, 14 years. Sade has a trans son, and she wrote and dedicated her new song about her son and to her son, and just handed in a video on Friday of like an entire music video of archival footage of her and her son. There's another song with Sam Smith. It's like some really big artists, and the compilation is 46 tracks long, so it's like 3 hours long. But please, it shouldn't be too hard to find. Have a listen. But that's the newest project from Red Hot, produced by two geniuses who work for Red Hot as well, Dustin Reed and Massima Bell. That's the main thing I'll plug. That's the most current. I think the mission for that is pretty clear, and I think that based on what the right wing was campaigning against for the majority of their campaign, trans awareness is important at this moment, considering their mission to strip back rights, in a very draconian way.
Well, I appreciate you being here, Jonathan. It really means a lot. I'm in Nashville. If you ever get down here, I know you like music. We're kind of known for music, so let me know if you ever get down here and we'll hang out.
I've been to Knoxville because Knoxville was where our production company for Hey Dude was. But Nashville, bizarrely, I've never been. Love everything about Nashville. I love country music. One of my good friends, Peter, just opened a music venue there called Brooklyn Bowl. It's like a very sort of like upscale music venue and bowling alley and great food.
That sounds like a really good mix. That's cool.
They've hosted some pretty big shows there. I think that's their fourth venue. There's one in Brooklyn, there's one in London, there's one in Nashville. There might be one in Vegas now as well. But yeah, go check that out. You want to send the private jet to pick me up?
Man, the pilot is actually off today. I hate that, but we'll do it in the next couple of weeks, man. So moving on to the next interview, this is with Debi Kalman, who played Lucy, and Kelly Brown, who played Brad. They did a joint interview for us, and it turned out really, really great. So have a listen.
Hi Deb.
Thank you both for being here. It really means a lot to us.
Our pleasure.
So the first question is going to be about Joe and how often you guys would talk about him when you guys got together and stuff. Like, was it something that you guys talked about every single time? Or was it something that you guys had talked about several years ago, and because there had been no developments, it wasn't really something that came up?
I honestly didn't think a lot about it until I heard about your podcast. I mean, I had thought when I heard rumors, thought the possibility of, oh my God, is he dead? Which was a horrible thought because I wasn't really close with him off the set. I mean, I loved doing scenes with him because he was so unpredictable, as he still is, but I wasn't really close with him otherwise. I hoped to God that he was alive and well, and really had no idea where he was, like everyone else.
He was such a neat, interesting, really down-to-earth, such a minimalist kind of guy. I really always thought he was just living like he was, just his own way, and hoped he was happy. I thought about him as much as I thought about everybody else. If Hey Dude came up or something came up, but they always thought about everybody.
I was much closer with everyone else on the set.
I get that. I mean, it happens.
I thought I was closer to the cast than I was, apparently, because Joe said to me that he thought I was older and just wanted to be with the older people, and they were too young to hang out with me. And I was thinking, wait, we had so much fun together. What do you mean? Well, I was surprised by that.
You guys weren't that different in age, though, were you?
The first, 2 seasons, they were in school every day. They had to be on, we had a classroom on the set, and I was I was out of high school already, but they were in high school. So I guess I don't know, it made me seem old. I was a little bit older, but
Yeah,
I remember at that age being a year or two different meant a lot because it meant the difference between you dating someone in high school or you dating someone in college. So I could see that.
Right, right. So maybe
And I
it
was
was
ancient
see.
to them.
you were my pal. You better stop it right now.
I was your buddy. I was really everyone's buddy. And a lot of the crew, too, because they were more my age.
As a side note, I think it's awesome that you guys will refer to each other sometimes by the character names. I think that's hilarious.
And then
And another thing I noticed that I've talked about before on these interviews is that the characters and the people who played those characters are so similar, I feel like.
I so agree. Yes. I
And
think Mr. Ernst is
Yeah.
the only one that wasn't like his character, which I'm so sorry you didn't get to meet, and I'm so sad I didn't get to see him this time.
I personally was not as uptight as Lucy was. I think Lucy was quite a disciplinarian, and I am not a disciplinarian.
That's so
But,
true. You are such a pushover in the best way possible.
I love you.
I love you right back.
Y'all are very sweet. So when you guys first heard that Joe had been found, what were your initial thoughts?
Relief. Because,
The
like I
band's
said,
finally
part
back
of me,
together.
yeah. I was so relieved that he was alive and well and flourishing. I have a tendency to think the worst a lot of times, just I do in life. And I was so thrilled. I had no idea that I would have such a connection when we reunited.
Yeah.
But
See, I
I
knew
absolutely
we
fell in
would.
love with him.
Yeah, every time David and I got together, or Christine and I, or whatever the couples, when Deb and I are together, it comes back like we never left. It's like that cousin
Yeah,
thing
right,
or something, you know?
Right.
And having us all together that weekend, that magical
Wow.
weekend in October in LA, we're doing it yearly now. It just, I mean, the group texts are amazing, and we're doing it yearly. Everybody's so excited to be together, and I knew
Really?
they would all feel that love. Yeah.
It just oozed of love,
Yep.
you know, and camaraderie when we're all together. And it's like we didn't drop a beat, even though
Nope,
we
did not
didn't
skip a
talk.
beat.
I didn't talk with some of them for, 10 years. And it would still be just like warmth and love and
Yep.
respect for one another. It's just awesome.
So that's breaking news, I believe, that you guys are actually planning on getting together again every year. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're talking about the Tankerverde. We're talking about our next reunion at the Tankerverde.
Wow, that'd be a lot of fun.
I thought the next one was going to be Comic-Con in January.
Yeah, let's hope. No, we're talking about the thing for just us
Be
is going to
crazy.
be Tankerverde. Yeah. We said next year, and Jonathan actually said, why not the spring?
Well, I hope you guys keep us updated on how that goes.
Going on.
He was the one that was bitching about it, and now he's like, I can't believe it. That was the best weekend of my life. He was so excited about it. We all were.
Did you meet Geoffrey?
No, he left already before they got there the next day, remember?
Yeah, too bad, yeah. Same with Mr. Ernst. They're both very special people. I mean, Mr.
I've
Ernst,
heard.
I mean, David Bridgeton's shoes.
We did not get to meet either one of them, but if they're listening and they want to reach out, that would be great. I'd love to complete the full set of interviews. Just let us know, findingdannylightfoot@gmail.com, guys. We would love to talk to you. So when you guys actually met him, was he immediately recognizable?
Immediately. He
Yeah,
didn't
immediately.
change. He filled out a
Did
little
you-
bit.
Did you
Yeah.
see any of the videos of all of us seeing him? I don't know. We didn't post any of it or anything, but we all cried. Christine
Yeah.
cried. I
No.
cried. David cried.
Oh,
yeah, we all.
Gosh.
I can't.
We'd love to see those videos, but we haven't.
He was a bucket of tears. I was about to say Danny. Joe was a bucket of tears. Yeah,
Really?
Coming
he
and
was
going.
so,
Well,
yeah, coming and going, all sad. Saying goodbye was horrible.
yeah, it was
That
horrible.
that still brings a lump in my throat.
I wonder why he waited so long to reconnect. I wonder if he just underestimated how he would feel when you guys met you.
Yeah, but he also underestimated how we would feel to see him.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
don't think he
Yeah.
realizes how special he is.
Yeah.
So did seeing Joe have any impact on your sense of closure after being on Hey Dude?
No, I don't call it closure.
More opening.
Exactly. Yeah, opening of a new relationship. Growth of our unity as a family.
What has surprised you the most since reconnecting with him and learning about his life?
For me, it was that he wasn't doing and flourishing in his art, because he's a fabulous artist. Yeah, and that he wasn't really pursuing it blew my mind.
I actually asked him about that in the interview, and he acted like he really wasn't too confident that it would be worth selling.
God, I hope that something comes out of this like that he gets some confidence.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. I mean, when we called one of the writers who he made a T-shirt for, and the art on that shirt, he was wearing the T-shirt, Alan Goodman, and it was phenomenal, and he had forgotten that he gave him that, made him that, and we're all just in awe. Like, that stuff would just fly off the shelves.
He saved the T-shirt for 35 years, and he wore it when he joined us on FaceTime.
Did Joe recognize it when he saw it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He cried again.
We don't want to make him out to be a mush toy. He definitely connected with his emotions.
Yeah, his humble, mushy side came out, boy.
Yes.
He's a neat person. He really is.
He really grew as a human being, that he really came into his own and really, to me, was so more communicative and brilliant that I didn't realize how brilliant he was.
You can tell that he reads a lot.
Really well read.
Yes.
He always was.
Yes. So impressive.
No doubt, no doubt. So these next questions are more about you guys individually and as friends. So obviously you can tell you guys are really close. So when did you guys realize that you were more than just castmates, that you were actually going to be good friends?
Right from the start.
Oh, I knew she was stuck with me from like day one. Yeah.
She was stuck with me. We did everything together, and we continued. I went out to visit her with my kids several times. I would go and work in the shop with her store, her parents' stores. We were just total family. Kelly's the most generous person I know in my life, and she just treated us like royalty. And our kids kind of grew up together. Her son Coop and my daughter JJ were born on the same day, like an hour and a half apart.
Oh, that's cool. So you guys being friends was just destiny, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And both of our husbands named James.
At the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, at the time.
We can both say that.
Do you guys have any behind the scene moments from Hey Dude that you want to share with everybody?
No. That's why they're behind the scenes, dude.
Touche. I know we had learned that there was something about the bunks that they were used as dressing rooms, maybe, or something like that.
We had really cool dressing rooms with a fountain in the middle, and we used that as a set sometimes, like the dressing room area. But the bunks were actual really cool bunkhouses that they built.
Okay, I'll have to look up where I got that information from and discredit that source.
We had beautiful dressing rooms the second season we came back.
Yeah.
But the worst part is being mic'd and forgetting that you're mic'd.
Oh yeah, see how that could get people in trouble.
I was so famous for that. That was so bad. Everybody listening, you're fighting with somebody on the set, something that really shouldn't be out in public. Oh, it was bad.
Uh-oh, it sounds like there was something you did that was really embarrassing. Cough it up.
Going to the bathroom for me.
Going to the bathroom, exactly. That was the worst.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
That sucks.
We did put lard on the table in every restaurant scene or food scene. We always had a big thing of lard on the table just for kicks and giggles.
Real lard or prop lard?
Real lard, like a thing that said lard on it.
I have no recollection of this, so it must have been when I wasn't there. Why?
I don't remember. I'm sure it was Graham.
Oh, okay. One of our head writers.
And he had this character out there called Stick Stickly. Does anybody remember Stick Stickly became like a big thing on Nickelodeon? And he lived in Tucson. And then all of a sudden, years later, I see Stick Stickly when I see my kids watching TV. I'm like, that's from Graham. That Stick Stickly came from Graham on the Hey Dude set. He was around in a lot of scenes too. Stick Stickly. It was this little stick.
Popsicle stick, right?
Yes, and then he became famous.
Oh
And
my
I never
God.
forget to ask Graham, was Stick Stickly, did he come from Arizona and move to New York and go to Nickelodeon? I wasn't sure.
Stick Stickly had a night show for a while. I remember that vaguely.
Yeah.
It says he was voiced by Paul Christie.
In '89, he lived on the set in Tucson. Somebody came out there from Nick and visited or something somewhere. Stick Stickly was born in Tucson.
So how has your relationship with the show changed over the course of your life? Has it always been something you've been willing to talk about, or have you kind of backed off a little bit because of the fact that it was a kid's show and things like that?
I personally was always thrilled to be on it. You know, that was my 3 minutes of fame, so to speak. I was blown away when I was recognized, you know, for the first year or two after it came out in public and asking for my autograph. And then that went away quickly. But yeah, I loved every minute of it. And Kelly did everything she could to get me keep coming back. She was my gift from God. So,
I didn't realize there was a chance that you wouldn't come back.
well, I mean, the frequency with which I was in the shows, it was a kid show. So Mr. Ernst was the adult, and I was the voice of reason, and the kids liked watching the kids more. So I was in a limited, you know, amount. Though I was a series regular. I was in the beginning of every show, but she definitely encouraged the producers and the writers to keep me coming back as often as possible.
We also got more cast members. Jonathan came on.
Yeah, more kids.
And Geoffrey
Yep.
came on. So it was more people
Yep.
to write for, and it was more
And
kids.
to
so it
pay.
was, and to pay and put up and all of it. So they started giving the kids more and taking my friend away.
I'm sure you were a great advocate.
Oh, yeah. Bring Debbie back, please.
Is there a day on set that you would love to go back and relive?
Every single one.
Wow.
Mine
Every single,
probably.
even the hot ones.
I agree, but my favorite show, that I said before, because it was written for me, would Stick Around, and I had my not at the time husband, but at the time live-in boyfriend. It was our show.
That was a fun show.
When Geoffrey got introduced to the show and all the cast was in it, it was really awesome.
Always so beautiful. The night shoots were insane.
Yeah,
Really?
and we had a few
my
of those on
God.
that show.
And we had that
Yeah.
guy that cooked all the food for us, and oh my God, Cotton.
Cotton was the kid wrangler. He drove us to and from the set.
It sounds like you guys may have been a little spoiled.
Yeah, we were.
Yes.
If it was
Totally.
going to be chili, he had the biggest pot of soup going. Oh my God. I mean, and soup for 100 people.
I just always pretended to be a kid so I could always go when they went to the set.
Literally the crew fanning us, and I love them as much as I did my cast.
Yeah.
So if Hey Dude was still going on today, where would your characters be?
In an old age home. Oh, sorry.
Where would you be?
I'd be probably running things right there with David, with Mr. Ernst.
Yeah. I think I'd be coming back every summer for a visit as my kids worked there. As Brad's kids worked there.
What about all that family money that Brad had?
Yeah. They lost it and then they got it back. We'd be coming there. My kids would be working there though, shoveling shit for sure.
That would give them some character for sure. Anything you guys want to talk about or promote before we go, like bringing Hey Dude back, for instance?
Yes.
You know, there was a meeting at Paramount, right? That David and Graham and Lisa and Christine had.
No, please tell me.
Paramount loved the idea. It was the best pitch that David ever had, and he had Graham by his side, and Graham's going to be, Graham would sign on, and Lisa, of course, and the next day Paramount laid off like 700 people, so we're on hold.
Wait. So when was this?
This was, David made the announcement to People magazine. The pitch was right before we got together in March. David and Graham and Lisa and Christine had the meeting with Paramount.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Me neither.
Yeah, David announced it to People magazine when we did Red Carpet. So they're still in contact, they're still talking, but there's big moves going on at Paramount right now. But Paramount owns us.
Yeah.
So there's talk of maybe it being sold or not Paramount, of the show, or somehow leasing. The shows are going to be leased back to other people because the networks are all, these new streaming networks are having trouble.
You think the entire cast would be on board?
Well, the people that we would want, those 4 people would be amazing.
I don't know if Joe would do it.
I bet he
I
would.
do too.
But that's amazing that you guys would actually be on board to a remake or a reboot, whatever it's going to be. I didn't even know it was a possibility.
Best pitch he ever had, David said.
And I'll tell you, I don't actively pursue acting anymore, so, because I don't like auditioning. To say that I would become a part of it is huge, and I would love to do a reboot.
That's awesome.
I would just go
That's
out there and be the stylist just to be around those people again. I'll dress them all. Give me a better budget though.
Anything else before we go?
I mean, personally, I just want to thank you for pursuing this and helping bring everything together for us and making it so much more special even. I really, truly thank you.
Yeah, same. Ditto.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much. This last interview will be with Mr. Geoffrey Coy, who played Kyle Chandler. So, Jeff, thanks for being here. Let's talk about Joe first. So, you were only on set with these guys for, what, a year or so?
I came in, so I was the last of 60 some odd shows. I came in the last 13, and then the show ended. So I had not had the opportunity to build the years of relationships that the original cast had. And that's true, across the board. However, that being said, is it specific about Joe? We had the Arizona connection. Joe's originally from Arizona, born and raised. I was born and raised in Phoenix.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I know Josh lived in Arizona. I don't know if Josh was born, but all 3 of us are basically Arizona guys. So my, a favorite memory I had of Joe was the fact that we both just were from Arizona. Joe also is not a pretentious person. He wasn't pretentious then, and he's still, even to this day, incredibly smart, very creative, very bright, very well read. Even then, he was incredibly creative, but quiet. I mean, Joe was quiet.
Everybody says the same thing, that he's incredibly creative and quiet, and that's sort of just how he is now too, when you meet him. So tell us how you learned that Joe had been found.
Kelly Brown told me. So because we were all going to meet in LA, we started kind of interacting again. And through text message, Kelly informed me, and I'm like, Joe Torres? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, how? Then the photo circulated of Allie and Joe. I was shocked because, there were so many rumors. You know better than anybody the amount of rumors that, when the speculation and what had happened to him, that he was a car dealer, in Jersey or something, and that he died, and on and on and on. And I really didn't know what to make of it. There are 2 schools of thought. One was he had passed away, because to literally not be, you cannot find where he is. Yeah. It is next to impossible. It was one of them. And the other was that, perhaps he had moved out of country. That was just mine. But, the fact that he was fine, and in Tucson, there was a sigh of relief, I think, for all of us. Is like, it's good that he's still here with us.
No doubt.
And then there was the whole, is he going to find his way to LA? And at one point, there was speculation whether it would go or not go. And then at the last minute, we found out he was going to be in attendance at SplatCon.
I didn't think there was any way he was going to go. I mean, he had stayed away from the public for so long. Like, why in the world would he all of a sudden put himself right back into it?
I was like, there's no way in hell he's going to find his way to LA.
Yeah.
No. Well, all of us had not been together in 30 plus years now. I had seen everybody with the exception of Kelly and Joe, because we did ATX about 10 years prior. So I had seen everybody except for Kelly and Joe, and I had not seen them since when the show wrapped up. That was over 30 years. So I think all of us were really excited to get back together.
So what was it like seeing him again after all these years? You saw him on Thursday night? Is that right?
I saw him Thursday night. I was blown away. At first, it was just almost as though it wasn't real. It is truly you. Gave him a big hug, and it was the same. It was the same Joe. I mean, very reserved, very very humble, quiet, kind of quirky. Great to see him though, honestly. And he was happy. You never know what to expect because you've been so far out of the public domain that you don't know, are there questions I should or shouldn't ask? But he was happy and enjoys what he's doing. And
yeah, that was hard for us to know, is how he was going to be when he got there. Did he feel like this was an obligation, or did he want to be there?
Right.
But ultimately, he was very warm and personable, so it was perfect.
He has a dry humor, but he has a dry creative humor too. It takes it, at least for me, it takes time for it to come out, but he can have a dry humor. And that was the other. We were at Lisa Melamed's house for a while, and then all of a sudden, the laughs and reminiscing the story started to take place, which was a lot of fun.
Did you know that when I got there, he actually went and hid and made me go find Danny Lightfoot one more time?
That's such a Joe thing to do. even trying to find him, so he's not going to make it easy.
And being in someone's house for the first time, trying to make sure I went into the right room and didn't go into a bedroom, it was really kind of funny and awkward all at the same time.
That story right there is a perfect representation of Joe Torres. That is, there's so much genius in all that, though, right? Because he knows it's a place you have no idea where you are, and now. I didn't know that.
That good. Creative, dry sense of humor is definitely reflective there.
Of course.
So let's shift the focus to you now. So is there any behind the scenes stuff or some juicy gossip or something that you can tell us from your time on the show?
I've been asked this question before, and I wish I had something just juicy. But there was an element of innocence on all of us. I mean, other than an argument here or there, or I mean, everyone now knows that Christine and David dated. You could always tell when they were happy or not when you're on set. But other than that, no, there really wasn't anything like, oh my gosh, the shock value. Again, it was on location in the desert, so there's not a lot to get yourself in trouble, number one. It's hotter than hell. So other than, making sure that rattlesnakes and coyotes aren't around, it was almost like summer camp, and all of us were there to do a job. So I know that I'm not delivering on any behind the scenes, but it was actually pretty darn innocent.
How old were you when you were filming there?
I would have been 18, and then when it ended, I would have been 19.
I was going to say maybe you guys were so young. I mean, you were teenagers, so, I mean, what teenagers not fixated on their own life and their own stuff at the moment, so you might not have just been aware of what was going on outside of your own vision, right? So if the show was still going and Kyle was still on the show, what would he be doing today?
He would have gone back to the roots of where he came from, and that would be, he would be back on a ranch. If I were to think of how he would have grown up, he would have ideally wanted to have a ranch of his own, no doubt.
It's funny because almost everybody I've asked that question to has said just about the same thing, that they would go back to their roots or go back to the Bar None or to a ranch, inherited or whatever the case may be. So that's funny.
Prior to this, I went and had lunch with David Lasher in LA. And what I what I told him that I thought would be funny, that if the show were to be rebooted, because of the conflict between Ted and Kyle, I said it would be funny that Ted has a daughter, Kyle has a son, and
We know where this is going. Yep.
yeah, you know exactly where this is going. And I could see, Ted's character being just absolutely beside himself, overly protective of his daughter and Kyle's son. And that would be so funny to see how that would transition
That
in kind of a
dynamic.
reboot. And there's so much you can do in terms of play with that, of just that
It would be.
rivalry that they had. But now it's through their kids, and of course we laughed about that. I'm like, that would be so much fun to play that
Wouldn't it be?
tension.
So David actually talks about that a little bit in the next episode, but if that were to happen and there were to be a reboot, would you be on board?
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Okay, good. Good,
Easy.
good.
That would be an easy one. That would be a lot of fun.
If that happens, that might be the most returning cast to a 90s reboot thus far. Because I know Saved by the Bell didn't have everybody come back.
Are there any late 90s, early 2000 Nickelodeon shows they've rebooted?
Well, I'm talking about just shows in general, like Boy Meets World, I think, was revived for a little bit.
What's interesting is, would this era of people welcome it? It's changed so much. It may be that, you get it out there and like, what the hell is this? Or it could. You never know. You never know.
They also did Are You Afraid of the Dark, I think, or they made a movie about it. So tell us what you've been up to since Hey Dude ended.
At least I had enough maturity and insight to know that this was not going to be a long-standing career for me, because you have to do what's called have talent, and I didn't. It doesn't take a film critic to realize that if you see Geoffrey Coy and Kyle, you're like, he's not good. It's too expressive and rigid, and I didn't know what in the hell I was doing. And it was pretty obvious that David Lasher, Christine Taylor, and David Brisbane, and I take nothing away from all the rest, but they in particular made it look so easy. And I was a disaster. So I actually went out to LA. I stayed with David for a couple weeks, started going in some auditions, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing? There's no way that this is going to be a career for me. And I was like, do I move to LA and all that? And within a couple weeks, I was like, I have no business going up against people in auditions that really are talented. So I went to school. I got a business degree at Baylor, and I have been in life sciences, as they say, for 30 plus years, which is medical device and biotech industry. And I have lived kind of a stereotypical, life. I'm married and have 3 kids, 2 of which are in college. I have lived in Texas now, this would be 20 years, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I will always have fond memories of Hey Dude, and I still keep in contact with most of all of them. We all have different times, but we've all had that connectivity, and I've enjoyed it. Life kind of went in a different direction.
Yep. So when you auditioned for Hey Dude, were you living in Arizona at the time?
I was in Phoenix at the time. So being really transparent, when David left the show, they are trying to find a replacement for that central character energy. So Jonathan Galkin came on, they cast him, and then they were looking for another character. And my understanding is they auditioned in LA, Chicago, New York, and didn't get what they wanted. And I had an agent doing local stuff in Phoenix. And at that time, they were doing a lot of filming, like the Disney Channel. I was on 2 Disney movies, and they were doing work out in Phoenix. And on my mom's side, we actually have a cattle ranch. Well, we did have a cattle ranch. At first, I thought, Hey Dude, it was like, Hey Dude from California.
Surfer, yeah.
And then it was a dude ranch. And I'm like, well, I lied. Actually, I really sold the fact that I have all this like experience on a ranch. And that is just completely not true, but they bought into it. And so,
well, if you weren't a good actor, they would have never bought it. So now you're kind of contradicting yourself.
That's it. Good actor or just serial liar. I don't know which of the two, but
one of the two.
One of the two. But went on the audition, and then I can't believe it. They had a callback, and then I had to do a test in my not screen test, but I had a test, and a scene was with Kelly, and I was morbidly nervous. I mean, just treacherous, and bombed. I mean, just crashed, and left there. Drove back from Tucson to Phoenix, and I'm like, no way in hell is this going to happen. And sure enough, Stephen Land calls me, said, hey, would you be interested in flying to LA? And I'm like, what? You are aware this is the guy who was testing with you? Okay, just making sure this is not somebody else. And I flew to LA and then met with Brown Johnson, and sure enough, they cast me, and I mean, and they were smart to give me, I mean, little dialogue, just because, like, let's make sure that he doesn't completely screw this up.
Were you aware that you were just going to be on for one season when you were cast?
No, I wasn't. I don't think any of us were. Well, I shouldn't say for the others. They may. I was not aware, because toward the end of that final season, I was under the belief that we were going to, come back. But then I guess they had made the decision to not have any off-site location filming, and then Orlando Studios was up and about, and then they had they made the decision to cancel the series. But no, I was not aware at all. I was really bummed because I had just gotten like a taste of it. I did modeling and a little bit parts, but that much of a show I had never really experienced. And just to the point where I started feeling a little more comfortable on set, it gets pulled. That was hard.
So I know you got to wrap it up. Anything you want to share to the fans, or a plug, or anything you want to say before we go?
Not a plug. I for the fans out there, they have always been so incredibly gracious and supportive of the show, and that means a lot, especially for shows that are this ancient, so to speak, in the 90s. There's a fan base. David says it best, is that if you were in that age group, we caught, and there was something nostalgic about it. And I love the fact that it was a show everyone seemed to enjoy. It's nice that there's still fan support even up today. It's nice to see. So
absolutely.
I had a little teeny part of it, but I'm blessed and humbled that I had that just little sliver of fun.
Well, we are also blessed as fans that we got to see it and experience that with you. Thank you, Geoffrey, once again. As we are closing in on 2 hours, wow, I can't believe that. I want to say thank you again to everyone who interviewed with us. We really appreciate it, as do the fans. We're going to go ahead and go to part 2, but before we go, John, anything else you want to say?
Thanks for listening.